The Farm, Part 3. The next morning, there was no early wake-up call from Mr. Norris. Instead, I was awakened by Sophie. She had crept across the hallway as soon as her father had left the house to begin his workday, having decided to sneak in some cuddle time before the rest of the family got up. "Dad says he doesn't need you today," she whispered, climbing into bed and wrapping one of my arms around her. "So it's just me and you today, baby. A whole Sunday together, like back in Boston." It was bliss, absolute bliss, and for the first time that whole weekend, things just felt right again. Later that morning, as we were sat around the kitchen table, Miss Nora spoke up. "Sophie, your brother and I have to head into town today to pick up a few odds and ends. Can you and Alex here be trusted to be alone around the house?" "Is Dad not going with you?" "He isn't, but he's got business to attend to around the farm, some repairs and what have you. He might not be back until later this afternoon." "Oh, okay. I mean, sure. Me and Alex will keep this place spick and span for you guys. Don't worry." "Good. Now you two just make sure you enjoy your last day of Alex's visit." "Thank you, Miss Norris. I really appreciate the sentiment," I said. Sophie's mom was a very sweet lady, but I couldn't help wonder how she ended up with her husband. Not only that, but I wondered just what they'd both been talking about the night before. After Mr. Norris and her son had left, Sophie and I rushed up to her bedroom to do exactly what young lovers get up to when left alone for a few hours. It was made all the more exciting for me by the fact that Mr. Norris could arrive back pretty much at any moment, and I knew Sophie felt the same way. So despite the fact that it was rushed and hushed, I feel like we made up for all the lost time the summer break had burdened us with. When it was done, Sophie got up to take a bath, which left me with a little time to explore the house. It was your typical family home in many respects, full of knickknacks, ornaments, drawings, and paintings that Sophie and her brother had done when they were children. Not to mention a plethora of family photos hung all around the walls, one of which included a delighted Sophie holding up her acceptance letter to Boston University. But my curiosity definitely got the better of me at one point, and I found myself rooting through bookshelves and cupboards just to see what I could find. In an old cupboard, I found a stack of old photographs, black and white ones that had been taken in 40s or 50s. One in particular showed a man about the same age as Sophie's father, who I suspected to be her parental grandfather. At least, it had to be, as the man looked almost identical to her dad. He had the same style of denim dungarees on, the same wary expression on his particularly indistinguishable face. Another showed the whole family unit, mom, dad, brother, and sister, all lined up in front of the same brick red barn that stood nearby the house. Each family member bore a disturbingly similar likeness to the people I was staying with that weekend. In fact, if you told me that this was just a picture of them taken with an old-style camera, I'd have believed you, no questions asked. But I didn't focus on the likeness for too long, as something in the background of the photograph caught my eye. It was a blurry, dark shape that looked to be peering around the edge of the barn. But given the poor quality of the photograph, there was no way of me to distinguish exactly what it was. Suitably weirded out, I put the photos away and continued my exploration of the house. I found myself exploring the kitchen area, admiring some of the older, more antique food preparation devices that were obviously still in use. I thought about how much my mom would freak if she saw some of this stuff. She loved anything rustic like that, and always used to tell me how it reminded her of her childhood in rural Massachusetts. I made my way into the family larder, admiring some of the hand-labeled cans of vegetables that were obviously contained products from the farm itself. Sure, I found their way of living to be a little strange, but there was still something deeply charming about it, even if it was adversely alien to what I was accustomed to back home. But at the back of one of the cupboards there, I found something that made my jaw drop. It was a large, burlap sack full of coins. I'm not talking small denominations. These were huge and appeared to be solid silver. Not silver dollars either. I mean, that would have been strange, but at least explainable. These things looked like they were huge chunks of silver. A little side note here. An uncle of mine owned a pawn shop in Charlestown for most of his life, and he would often bore us to tears with stories of people who tried to rip him off with frauds or fakes. But I remember the details of one particular story, where he told me and my cousins that you could always tell if something was genuine silver by the markings on it. Silver dealers would often stamp silver with a particular numbers which indicated the percentage of fine silver in the piece. A stamp of 900 or 800 means the piece is 90% or 80% silver, and is often called coin silver, or in other words, not totally pure. But the hunks of metal in the burlap sack had no markings on them whatsoever, which I found very suspicious. My uncle also bored us with a foolproof technique of testing whether or not silver was genuine, what he called the ice test. He told us that silver happened to be particularly good at conductor of heat, so if you place a piece of ice on it, the ice starts to melt pretty much immediately, almost like it's been placed on something warm, rather than just any regular old metal. I made sure the coast was clear and took the coin to the family freezer, and popped a piece of ice out of the ice tray before placing it on the coin. And no way, the ice started to melt right away. I was dumbstruck. I was holding what appeared to be a piece of pure silver in my hand. No wonder the family could afford to pay Sophie's college fees. They had a huge stack of pure silver, just sitting there in their goddamn larder. And that couldn't have been all of it. At least, that's what I told myself. There had to be more. Much more. Somewhere secure so it would be safe from potential thieves or home invaders. But just where exactly were they getting this stuff from? I had no idea. Mr. Norris had mentioned something to do with investments, sure, but who the hell pays out of silver? And pure silver at that. Silver that was unregulated by international markets. That, coupled with the photos, the strange vegetables, and photographs, just who was this family? It was then that I heard footsteps coming from the upper floor. Sophie was out of the bath and was bound to hear downstairs at any moment. I scurried back into the larder, placed the wet piece of silver back into the burlap sack, and rushed back out and got myself a glass of water, to play all innocent as I heard her coming down the stairs. "Alex, what are you doing here?" she asked, clearly suspicious. "Oh, me?" I replied. Nothing at all. Just getting myself a drink is all." I'm a terrible liar, always have been, and she could read it on my face that something was wrong. "Is there something you want to talk to me about?" she asked in an accusatory tone. "Nah, nothing. I mean, what would there be to talk about?" I know you haven't been enjoying my mom's cooking." "Hey, it's fine. I mean, I had no idea I was such a fussy eater, but turns out you keep living and learning, huh?" "Alex, there are things you should know about this family." "Like what?" We're not like other folks, not even folks around here. And there may have been some things you might have seen around the farm this weekend. Things that seemed a little off." "What are you trying to say, Sophie?" I asked, but it was a sick charade at this point. The look I was giving her told her all she needed to know. "Things like, well, I don't quite know how to tell you this, but..."
"Sophie, Alex, you two here?"
It was Mr. Norris, with the most imaginable timing. Sophie's expression turned from one of discomfort to one of perkiness. "In here, Dad. Me and Alex were just about to make ourselves a snack."
"No time for that just yet. I need Alex to come help me with something. It won't take long, but it's important."
Sure, Mr. Norris. I'll be right out." I followed Mr. Norris outside, tracing his footsteps into the cornfield, where 2 full wheelbarrows full of snow-white corn torn from their fleshy husks.
"Give me a hand with these, would you?"
I obliged, pushing one of these 2 barrows back towards the house. But as we did so, we passed by the large brick-red barn that stood near the farmhouse. As we approached, I set eyes on the thick wooden paneling. I began to feel distinctly uneasy. At first, I assumed it was because it reminded me of those old family photos, and how the figures in them looked eerily similar to the current occupants of the house. But then I began to hear something coming from inside. I stopped pushing the barrow for a moment and strained my ears to hear what the noise was, and began to hear a faint kind of snuffling sound coming from behind the boards. Mr. Norris had told me that the only livestock on the farm were the cows they kept in the cattle shed. So just what was living in there? It was then that I heard it, a muffled but unmistakable sound of squealing. As I stood there, an obviously confused look on my face, Mr. Norris also stopped wheeling his barrow, turning to look at me with a grave look in his eyes.
What's wrong, boy?
What's in the barn, Mr. Norris?
Nothing, just some camping equipment,
he replied irritably. I just stared back at him, feeling the anger of being lied to rising in my gut. Mr. Norris dropped his barrow hard into the dark, turning on a dime before me and marched over to me.
Are you and me going to have a problem, son?
He seethed. No, sir, I replied, more defiant than polite.
Let me tell you something right now, boy,
he growled through gritted teeth.
You don't ever go near this barn, ever. Is that clear?
Crystal clear, I replied, feeling the adrenaline coursing through me.
If I catch you sniffing around here at all, you will never set foot on this farm again, and I will make damn sure you and Sophie won't be seeing each other anymore. Now pick that wheelbarrow up and bring it to the house.
End of part 3.